This training is brought to you from the Disability Services Program at SAFE, which is located in Austin, Texas. SAFE stands for Stop Abuse for Everyone, and that's our mission.
Hi, my name is Heidi Lersch. My pronouns are they, them. I'm the manager for Disability Services at SAFE. Welcome back to the Roll Call Training Series. This is Unit 4, Trauma and Children. This is the fourth of 5 trainings on working with child victims with disabilities. We'll focus on defining trauma, some common responses to traumatic events, including fight, flight, and freeze. We'll also talk about how traumatic events can impact a child's development and several trauma-informed responses that can support children with disabilities that experience traumatic events, such as medical trauma, bullying, sexual assault, exploitation or abuse, violence in their homes, or mental health-related crisis. So what is trauma? Trauma is a child's response to an event that involves intense fear and a sense of helplessness. The child experiences extreme stress that overwhelms their nervous system and their ability to cope. The child feels a loss of control over their self and their environment. But trauma is not the event itself. Trauma is the nervous system's reaction to that event. A person's response to a traumatic experience is also affected by their life experience. A single traumatic experience can range from experiencing a natural disaster, like an earthquake or flood, or during a man-made event, like a car accident or witnessing violence. Experiences that occur together include a person witnessing family violence in their home and being a victim of abuse in their home at the same time. Experiences that can extend over time are situations that occur repeatedly over long periods of time. These experiences cause intense feelings of fear, loss of trust in other people, decreased sense of personal safety, guilt, and shame. For example, children living in ongoing abuse, children with disabilities bullied at school and exploited by others, medical trauma from multiple surgeries or unpleasant medical interventions, which are often not explained to children, and additional discriminations that are cultural prejudices that can make people feel unsafe based on who they are, including sexism, racism, ableism, and heterosexism. Experiences that are a mixture may be multiple and varied and include things like living in a domestic violence situation and experiencing a car accident and having a medical procedure. In addition to physical, sexual, and emotional abuse, people with intellectual and developmental disabilities frequently experience other traumatic events that are related to ableism. When children and adults with disabilities are physically restrained and secluded from others, when straitjackets, solitary rooms, and even being tied down are used, this results in trauma. Children and adults with IDD have significantly higher rates of emotional neglect and serious injury compared to non-disabled peers. As mentioned on the last slide, children and adults with disabilities are also often subjected to medical procedures that are psychologically distressing. They may have chronic medical problems that necessitate surgeries and other invasive procedures. Trauma is when too much happens too fast. As we've been talking about, trauma is a response to an event or a series of events. After a traumatic event, children's first line of defense is social engagement. They look for help from other people, such as family, friends, and teachers. They may even try to negotiate with a threat if it's another person. If that doesn't work, children may fight or flee. For example, they may push the abuser away and leave, or run away and hide. These reactions are all driven by instinct. When social engagement, fight, or flight do not work, the child's next line of defense may be to freeze. The freeze state allows children to conserve energy and is related to our primitive drive for survival when we are under threat from a predator. These instinctual drives for survival reside in our nervous systems, which include the brain and spinal cord and all the nerves that run throughout the body. The nervous system also regulates the autonomic functions in the body, such as digestion and heart rate, and sensory motor movements, the body's movements during regular life activities and also during fight, flight, and freeze. Reactions to danger are not within our control. Children react instinctively in order to survive, and all responses to trauma are reasonable, normal responses to not normal situations. As we discussed, if there is no help from another person, children who perceive danger are most likely to fight or flee. Even after the traumatic event, children can have the same fight or flight reactions to stress. When that happens, rational thinking and reasoning is not effective. This is not a teachable moment. Some of the reactions that can come with fight or flight include oppositional behavior, fighting, stealing, and lying, engaging in power struggles, other aggressive behavior, including angry outbursts, and being hyperactive or overly talkative. There might also be an increase in risk-taking. Youth may begin to experiment with drugs, alcohol, self-abusive behaviors, or may run away or take other unsafe risks. Younger children may begin pulling their hair, scratching themselves, or hurting themselves. If they begin doing any of these things all of a sudden, you need to pay close attention. There might also be an increase in sexual behaviors. Children may suddenly act out or draw sexual pictures that do not fit their developmental or chronological age. Children may be sexually aggressive with younger children, or children between the ages of 5 and 3 may become sexually inappropriate in a public setting or with peers. Now, let's talk about what the freeze response looks like. When a child is in a state of freeze, they will appear less stimulated and less traumatized. Freeze is related to the most extremely fearful situations. The child's nervous system has responded to the overwhelming impact or reminders of the trauma by shutting down. This supports the child in coping and getting through the day. It's a reasonable and neurobiologically based response. When a child trauma survivor establishes a sense of being safe, and this often means the child is receiving some kind of intervention, such as therapy, the nervous system has an opportunity to settle down. They may be less numb, and underlying thoughts and feelings may begin to emerge. This can include rage, linked to not being able to successfully defend or protect themselves when in danger. Now, the child's behaviors and actions become more consistent with fight and flight. As the child's nervous system moves out of freeze, that state of energy conservation, they may become very distressed. I mention this shift or change because it can be interpreted that the child is regressing or losing gains made in recovery. However, this is common and a somewhat predictable stage in recovery from trauma. Overall, this is a time when children and their helpers need a lot of support in normalizing what the child is experiencing. When a child with a disability is experiencing trauma, their body and mind are simply trying to stay as safe as possible. Because the brain is focused on safety, the child's progress through developmental stages may be affected. Experiencing traumatic events can lead children to believe that the world is uncertain and unpredictable. This creates problems with boundaries and distrust and can result in social isolation. Due to increases in hormones and neurotransmitters involved in the human stress response, children may easily respond to stress and perceived danger by going into high alert. After traumatic events, children may have chronic difficulty regulating their emotions. Traumatic events may also create long-lasting feelings of detachment, withdrawal, and an amnesia-like state. When children experience trauma, many aspects of their bodies and their lives are affected. Some ways that trauma can affect behavior include at-risk behaviors, regressive behaviors, and school difficulties. Some ways that trauma can affect cognition include memory deficits, attention problems, learning difficulties, and language development. Some ways that trauma can affect emotions include emotional regulation, depression, and anxiety. Some ways that trauma can affect neurophysiology include hyperarousal, dissociation, and alterations in brain maturation. Some ways that trauma can affect relationships include attachment difficulties and loss of trust and safety. The next slides outline 5 core values of trauma-informed responding and care that can create a lens for what we observe and help us respond in ways that create safety and reduce harm. The 5 values of trauma-informed care are safety, trustworthiness, choice, collaboration, and empowerment. For safety, provide physical safety and make sure the child feels as safe as possible. Provide emotional safety by being patient, kind, and responsive. You can also provide safety by addressing body language. For example, if a child is clinging or hiding behind someone, you might say, "It's okay to be nervous or shy, but we are safe and we are here to help." For trustworthiness, be honest with the child about what is going to happen as much as you are able. For choice, provide the child options for making choices about where they sit, if they want some water, or any other options for giving them choices during your interactions. For collaboration, encourage the child to participate in what happens to them. For empowerment, support the child in finding and using their own voice. What else do children need? Children need to know that any emotion they have is okay. Be sensitive to and validate children's feelings. Children need safe and appropriate outlets for expressing their emotions. They also need to be taught safe ways to express the hard, overwhelming emotions. Options can include music, art, dance, and nature. Children need nurturing, support, and reassurance. All children need to be nurtured, supported, and reassured about themselves and their future. Support children in finding their strengths and the people who will support them. All children have strengths. Children who have been abused may need help finding and relying on their own strengths, the activities that they are good at, and the people who can help support them.
Thank you, Heidi, for sharing information about trauma in children. You discussed the fight, flight, and freeze responses to traumatic events, shared about how trauma can affect typical development, and provided some helpful tips for responding to children in a trauma-informed way. Our last roll call training, Unit 5, Responding to Distress, will provide detailed examples of recognizing and responding to children experiencing distress caused by trauma. On behalf of our whole team here at Safe Disability Services, thank you for supporting child victims with disabilities. SAFE's digital guide provides tips on working with children with disabilities, including autism spectrum, communication disability, intellectual disability, mental health disability, and children who are deaf, deafblind, deaf-disabled, or hard of hearing. The digital guide works like a smartphone app and can be used by anyone, including law enforcement, child protective services personnel, teachers and parents, and other related professionals. Each area of disability has a section on what to know, tools, and responding to distress. The guide also has 2 general sections covering communicating, interviewing, and responding to specific signs of distress. For download instructions, visit allkidssafe.org. You can also find the link in the video description below, along with other helpful resources.